I am so happy to have everyone here. Um, Thanks for coming out. I hope all of you who are in academia have turned your grades in. You've dealt with all of your misfit children in classes, and you're just going to be able to sit here and enjoy these four wonderful readers. This is Birmingham Poetry Review's Zoom reading. We started this during COVID, just to reach out to people, to enjoy people, to celebrate the writers who have published in our journal. And tonight we have four wonderful readers: Beth, Henry, Erica, and Jay Bruce. These are people I've known, people I've published, people I admire. A little bit about the Birmingham Poetry Review. We were founded in 1987, which is the year that I graduated high school, with a mullet and really, really awful acid wash tight jeans that I pegged at the bottom. Um, and I wish I could get back to that stage. I'm still trying, but instead I've got floppy ears with ear mites and antlers that look more like kale, but that's all right. Um, we uh, we went from a 64-page side stapled journal, black and white, to what we are now, which is this burgeoning 300-page beast with a color original artwork cover and a special section for our featured poet, which includes new poems by the poet, an essay written on the poet, and an interview with the poet. Um, some of the accolades we've had over the past few years: we've been in Best American Poetry 5 of the last 10 years. This year we had 2 poems in. We've been in Best New Poets. We just had a poem in Best New Poets this year, and Pushcart Prize. And in 2020, we won the AWP Small Press Award for the best journal in the country, which is pretty good for a journal. And I was telling people earlier, where I pay my folks in beef jerky and M&Ms, and they think that that's just how it works, because that's what they pay me at UAB, and I just share what I get. But anyway, I'm so pleased to have you here, and thank you for coming. And these readers really are. I admire them. They have mentored me through their writings, and hope you enjoy. I'm going to hand off to Jemiah, who's an intern with BPR, and she's going to introduce our first reader.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for being with us tonight. My name is Jemiah. I am interning with the Birmingham Poetry Review this fall semester. And our first reader for tonight is the esteemed Dr. Erica Dawson. She is the author of 3 books of poetry, the first being When Rap Spoke Straight to God. The second is The Small Blaze Hurts. And the third is Big Eyed Afraid. Her poems have appeared in Best American Poetry, Orion, Rebel, The Believer, and other journals and anthologies. Dr. Dawson holds a BA from Johns Hopkins University and an MFA from Ohio State University and a PhD from the University of Cincinnati. She lives in Baltimore, D.C. area with her pets. And as she reads, I will be putting the links to her different poems and her website in the chat.
Thank you so much, Jemiah, for that lovely introduction. When people read the degrees back to me, it makes me feel really old because that BA was a long time ago now. Hi, everyone. Happy holidays. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I really appreciate it. I have to thank Adam Vines, who I've known for decades and decades, back when we were youngins crawling around in the woods together. And everyone else at Birmingham Poetry Review for this invitation to be part of this reading this evening, and for publishing 3 new poems in their upcoming issue. The poems and everything that I've been working on lately are part of a manuscript in progress. The project is mainly about mental illness, specifically bipolar disorder, and ideas of wellness, survival, and destruction, the ways the body can save us and destroy us at the same time. The simpler way of explaining the project is that I had a massive mental breakdown and I feel the need to write about it and share it with all of you. So that's where we're at tonight. The first poem I'm going to read is titled Mood Swing. And here I was just thinking about the different ways to describe what it feels like when suddenly out of nowhere you just completely change course. You do a complete 180 from who you were, regardless of whether you're manic or depressed, and how sometimes it even feels like a bit of a good thing. So this is Mood Swing. My heart fell out my mouth last night. I left it on the floor for hours, lit candles in memoriam. The dog left it alone as if she'd known the look of reverence. My heart was in my throat for days before. Swallow, regurgitate, pulse tasting sweet, the ventricles like honey, atria like sugar in the raw. I don't know how I didn't choke. How it broke free from the sternum's bower, I'll never know. My body makes its moves without consulting me. I picked it up and cupped it in my hands. The aftertaste didn't stay long, but goddamn, was it worth the lick? I'm very thirsty today. Hydrate or dihydrate, my friend says. The next poem is called Stay Apparatus. And a stay apparatus is the group of ligaments and tendons and muscles which lock the major joints in the limb of a horse. The stay apparatus is the reason why the horse can fall asleep standing up. I learned that in the middle of the night one night. And this poem is about trying to capture that feeling that you have when you're going through something difficult and someone suggests that you do yoga to make it all better. It's always yoga. It's never Pilates. It's always yoga. And for me personally, yoga didn't make it better. So this poem came from that. Stay apparatus. I may survive the tall, sweet gummed star leaves waving in the late thunderstorm's remnants if I could just lock my limbs in child's pose and stay that way for 3, 4, 5, 6 days, outstretched but folded, like I'm comfortably longing. And it's all very fortunate and vaguely religious, as it looks like my floor lamp is an idol to which I'm bowing, and the yoga could fix me, someone said. So there you go, 2 birds, 1 stone, etc. I'm healed. Very good timing, since the wind mixed in the leaves sounds like a sighing post-disaster, reverent for what was lost. Relieved so awfully beautiful, I want to make it all for me and pass away, leaving the suffering just in the leaves of the sweet gum turned from their satiny dark green to wan yellow in pale, pale November. So while I was working through my recovery, my doctors and I tried every single treatment that we could think of. I did, regular talk therapy. I did yoga. I did ECT therapy, shock therapy, as they used to call it. And this poem was about doing ketamine injections, where they actually use the drug ketamine to make you have a trip, which in some way helps the brain heal itself, so they think. So this is Portrait of the Artist as Treatment Resistant. That was Portrait of the Artist as Treatment Resistant. When my doctor recommends we try a round of ketamine injections, I get all wound up, like, don't vets use that to anesthetize horses? Why don't we just lobotomize me? I take 15 pills a day now. I can barely look anyone in the eye for lack of focus. I still have to be a person. When the doctor forcefully squeezed my shoulder, said breathe, and put the first syringe deep in my upper arm, I burst into a nebula. Even the sun envies the light coming from me as one tile on the wall dances, as I am sleep intensified. awake in dreams. Come reap my warmth. When I encounter cold again, everything's animal instinct. I spin, trying to get dizzy back. I slap my face for the heated tingle, but the space of the K-hole has closed and I can't find a single feeling. The doctor seems to read my mind. A higher dose Thursday. I am as close to healed as I have been since grandiose delusions, with that inarguable allure of it's all in your head, the crisis and the cure. So the manuscript deals not only with personal trauma, but also familial and generational trauma, because who we are as individuals is just as much shaped by our collective histories as by our individual experiences. So there's a lot of my family, my grandparents, great grandparents, and just sort of Black history in general in the manuscript. So these two final poems come from that. This first one is called Bullhead, and that's a type of catfish. Because he doesn't drink in front of them, fishing trips are one of the only times Mom and her sisters see my grandfather completely sober. An Aurorian sky, orange undertones, a borrowed boat, lake few miles out of town. A creamed corn can contains a cast of worms shoveled up the night before. Best part, Mom says, is how, when he lets his guard down, Texas slips out, still inside his tenor. Bullhead becomes 3 syllables. But they live in Michigan now. New start, the same old 60s. Last week, Molotovs, gunshots, an army of 300 cops, and not even in Detroit. The Lansing State Journal says what sparked the riot is unclear. On sheets of newspaper, Mom makes a cut behind the head along the belly fins. Head in one hand, its lips almost provocative in their protrusion, she pulls the thick black skin off, a banana peel, like a pro. There go the entrails in the bucket. Black ink stained red, the white wet, she crumples up the paper. Her mother melts butter in the cast iron. They all know what they'll keep and what they'll toss. They later use the sturdy bones for stock. Her father digs a hole for the guts and head. Scraps the dog exhumes but doesn't eat. And finally, one last drink. And one last poem. This is called Pride. I start menstruating at 12, already tall, but not especially womanly. All the girls who also start use these little panty liners wrapped in pastel paper, hardly thicker than a dish towel. My flow from the beginning is heavy. I leak through pads and have to wear 2 Super Plus tampons at once. I don't have the chance to be afraid of putting something inside me. The pediatrician says nothing's wrong. Black women tend to bleed more than others. But not from everywhere, she should have said, and I wouldn't have spent time thinking I'll bleed out from a nick on my shin that I just started shaving. I am a literal child. Leviticus says we're unclean while bleeding. Anyone who touches us unclean. Anything on which we sit or lie unclean. And when it stops, we must wait 7 days, then bring 2 young pigeons to the priest, who will extend one for a sin offering, the second for a burnt offering. Otherwise, we will die. Almost 400 times now, I die. Black women bleed. One time, I bleed more than a month. I haul my stained mattress outside 6 months later, lean it against the dumpster in back of my apartment. At the landfill, birds circle above the refuse, starlings with their gift for mimicry rattling the tractor's noise. All day I'm sleeping on the floor. The bleeding comes again. Black women tend. I've never been so filthy. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dawson. That was spectacular. We have our next. We're gonna jump right in. The poems were amazing. Thank you so much. We're gonna go ahead and go with our next reader, who is the Dr. J. Bruce Fuller. The unmatched, unrivaled Dr. J. Bruce Fuller is the author of How to Drown a Boy. His chapbooks include The Center's Ground, Lancelot, and Flood, and his poems have appeared at the Southern Review, Crab Orchard Review, Nice Review, Birmingham Poetry Review, and Best New Poets 2022, among others. He has received scholarships from Bread Loaf, the Sawane Writers Conference, and Stanford University, where he was a Wallace Stegner Fellow. He teaches at Sam Houston State University, where he is the director of TRP. And as he does his works as well, I will put in his website and a link to his book as well.
Thank you. So happy to be here. Big fan of Birmingham Poetry Review and all the poets here. So thanks for having me. I'm going to be reading from my new book, How to Drown a Boy, which is almost a year old in a couple of weeks. So I'll just start with the title poem, How to Drown a Boy. Not with water, but with sweat, you work the boy until he cries. At the barn faucet, think of your own father. Cup your hands and tell the boy to look deep inside this well. Make him drink from your hands, make him drink until he swells, make him taste the salt and split nails, cracked knuckles, bone, and blood. Tell him this blood is the life I have given, this blood the covenant, that you must always measure your life against mine. Now sneak him the whiskey behind the shed where his mother can't see. Show him that this is what a man has earned, and just a taste because he's only a boy with too much of his mother in him. A sip more and he will learn. And if the sharpness of the steel leaves him weak, or the swing of the hammer wears him out, and if he squirms at the trigger pull to give the doe a chance to flee, then walk the boy down to the river and baptize him there with your own two hands. Thank you. I'm gonna do maybe a rare thing. I have a Christmas poem in this book. It's not really a Christmas poem. It's just takes place at Christmas. It's like Die Hard. It just takes place at Christmas. I'm gonna get so much. I'm gonna get so much hate for that. Did you hear what I just said? At me. This poem is called Parable. When I am low and thinking darkly, there often comes to mind a moment from my childhood of two brothers about our own age named Cain and Abel. Not the boys from the book, but the sons of a friend of my father who invited us to stay one Christmas when we were down on our luck again. And how after we played all afternoon in the yard with an old foam football and ate together boiled shrimp with rice, we sat down to watch the boys open their presents. And I didn't realize until Abel opened his to find the same football, two chunks of foam torn by the dogs, how none of the toys were in packages, and many I had seen earlier in their room, and how I couldn't keep the shame from my face as I met Cain's eyes, and his look was a stone I have carried with me on some days as heavy as the way he placed his hand on his brother's shoulder. And oh God, how I can't find a lesson in all of this. Oh, dear God of terrible mercies. I was when poets write Christmas poems. They're never joyful. I'm going to read a poem that appeared in Birmingham Poetry Review, and I want to say that this is the last acceptance letter that I got in the mail. I almost threw it away, because they used to only mail rejections. Somehow Adam Bynes was still mailing contracts through the Postal Service. This poem almost didn't make it in because of that. So thank you, Adam. This poem is called All the Men in My Family Die First. Too much sugar in my coffee and the half pack of cigarettes on the table gives less comfort these days. Some mornings I smell the pipe my grandfather smoked, burnt cherries, though I can't remember his voice. They tell me he did not speak much after the war. My grandmother lived 25 years without him. She buried 3 of her 4 sons. After each one smoked himself to death, I'd sit up and visit for a while. Biscuits from scratch and coffee, her daily clockwork, though her laugh lessened with each sweetened cup, until in her long silence I rose to go. Um, just one more from me. Thank you again for being here, and thanks to BPR and all the staff, all the poets that are here reading with me. I'm very happy to be here, and I'd like to dedicate this last one to Adam Bynes for all his support over the years and his help for getting this book um, into the world. So this is called They Said. They said Bo was on that crystal, and that's why he lost so much weight. Come back from summer break looking long and thin, so the coaches moved him from left tackle to outside linebacker. And I was so skinny that kids made jokes and threw food at me in the cafeteria. They said, eat a cheeseburger, you couillon. And I didn't want to be skinny no more, and I didn't want to be weak no more, and I didn't want to do Crystal, even though Bo was popular now, even though his new girlfriend was a real Dixie queen. And when the Archelaus news said he was dead, I didn't understand, and I didn't know they also called it meth. They said the Lord wasn't going to flood the world no more, but he must have forgot about us, so we took what we could from the waterlogged houses, mostly guns, mostly pill bottles, mostly things we could sell, no questions asked. In my neighbor's house, I smashed the door of a gun cabinet, and the deer etched on the glass scattered. They said, take that shit, hurry the fuck up, but I just stood there looking till we left. He said, you a pussy, you could have made a fortune. And they said Edward got sent to Angola and come back with a swastika on his neck. They said blood is made in the bones, but oil comes from the Gulf. And when the storms rock the rigs, the chaplain takes confessions and the boys cross themselves all night. They said Big Dan got blowed up and burned all over, and now he lights his cigarettes with his ring finger. They said the settlement money long gone. They said when the rigs catch fire, some boys jump. They said them boys burn and even the water can't put them out. They said his daddy's a son of a bitch, and they said he's a drunk, and they said he ain't got no daddy no ways. I try to remember everything I don't know about myself. Like, is he inside here somewhere just waiting to lash out at me? They said you so much like your daddy, you so much like him I could spit. And they say he killed a man and that's why he run off. And I remember the night in the kitchen sink and Memo yelling and the blood running down his face, and I know it's true. They said if you don't fight him, then we'll beat your ass. So I took the 3-foot branch of pine from the side of the road and I bashed his fucking face in. I can't remember his name, but I know they say it sometimes when they're drunk and looking back and thinking about how good they had it back then when we were hungry and terrible and young. They said you one of us now. They say you don't never have to be alone now. They said you did good. They said you did good. They said you did good. Merci.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Fuller. That was amazing. I'm Naomi. I am the other intern at BPR, and I'm going to be introducing our next 2 authors. Up next on our reading list is Dr. Beth Gylys, award-winning author, distinguished professor at Georgia State University, and the co-founder / principal investigator of Beyond Bars, a journal of literature and art, a Mellon-sponsored literary journal for incarcerated writers and artists. Beth Gylys is the author of 5 books of poetry and 3 chapbooks. Her last two full-length collections, The Conversations Turned to Wide-Mouth Jars and Body Braille, were both named books all Georgians should read. Her work has recently appeared or is forthcoming in the Birmingham Poetry Review, West Branch, the James Dickey Review, Swim, and on the Best American Poetry blog. As she reads, I will put the links to 3 of her books in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Naomi. Thank you, Adam. I'm so honored to be a part of this reading. Those readings were like, oh, I feel like I'm still catching up emotionally to all of that amazing work. I am, yeah, beyond honored. I think Birmingham Poetry Review is just a fantastic journal. I feel like it's so rich, so, it celebrates so many powerful voices. So anyway, thank you. I'm gonna read just a few poems. My father died in 2020, and I wrote a little book of odes to my father, and I'm gonna start with a poem from those odes, and his birthday was on Sunday. So anyway, this is Ode to My Father's Manhattans. Clink of ice in a glass, crack of the cubes as he poured, bright red eye of a maraschino bobbing in the brown gold slosh of Jim Beam and sweet vermouth. Surely we could swim in a lifetime of those drinks, gallons upon gallons, swirled, sipped, swilled, and swallowed, sticky on the counter. The twinkle of his high. My father's Manhattan sometimes made him want to dance, to tell the latest joke. My shy father, lit from within, becoming someone other than himself, sloppy, jolly, sometimes standing, or that is how I remember it. Him at the table standing, hands moving like an Italian from my mother's side of the family. My father and the glass empty, but for soft stones of melting ice. My father, a buzz, chatty, full of stories. Then my father spent, his chin on his chest. Thank you. I just want to say it's so encouraging to see so many people here. I've been feeling a little blue about things. Like some elections and weird things have happened. So anyway, it's really just encouraging to see so many people out celebrating poetry. This is the poem that's going to be appearing in the Birmingham Poetry Review. And I should probably give a slight trigger warning. It does deal with sexual assault. I've been working on these breakup poems, and I saw a naked doll on the side of the road. So this is break up as naked Barbie on the side of the road. No, I said. One day I perched on the back of his rented motorcycle. The next I walked through sun as if through a grove of Ginsu knives. His curly blonde hair, his glasses. How funny sweet he had seemed, eating crawfish beside me, the plastic red checked tablecloth, the black beads of their eyes, the table and floor of strewn shells. Loud Greek waiters shouting orders, a chaos of crackers and long, skinny forks, retsina and ouzo, and a walk on a long beach beside ruins, the milky puddles of the moon. Was the doll a Christmas gift? Did she once wear a bathing suit, bridal gown, go-go outfit? Did she cheer, own a cat? A kitchen with mini stove, fridge. When does it change? A brother pulls out her hair, the dog bites through her neck, and there's always a cute boy, more important, dressings up. Laughter. We were having a good time, weren't we? Lines from our feet blurred behind us as waves devoured what was left of the white coast. We went back to my room. I was tired. He wanted to stay. We did that dance. He stayed. All the lines blurred, all the no's. Sorry, it's a little dark. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing. Juliana Gray, Erica Dawson, like these like amazing writers that I love. Lauren Slaughter, all these writers. Oh my God. Thank you for coming. I'm gonna read an old poem now. This is it's just a poem I've been thinking about. A good friend of mine just lost his brother, 57 years old. Anyway, so I've just been thinking about loss a little bit. This is called Split. Everyone I know is crying or should be crying. I say their names each night. Why do I do this? The wind won't listen. Neither will those two dark birds that slip across the sky. It's winter. Naked branches aren't full of ache. They neither hover nor point nor feign like open arms. They are simply growing, flecked with knots and ridges etched by different shades of line. Don't let me tell you how it is. Go out, look. Life makes itself without us, and a boy bounces his bright red ball along the sidewalk, not quite one of us. Thanks. I'm gonna commit the cardinal sin, which is I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read two poems that are fairly really new, like months new, weeks, days new. Anyway, this is called Witness, and it's based on a true story. So Witness. I'm not going over. I never knew a truck had knees until I watched one buckle just yards ahead on I-75 after a white car cut it off, and the beast lurched sideways, head already going down, so close, so real. The scene was screen ready, the kind of suspended slow motion that can only happen in a disaster. The metal behemoth careening sideways, its neck bent in a way that said breaking, broken, its bulk shrieking across two lanes. Even my husband's frantic shout, a faraway white noise, as I slowed, pulled over, stepped out to help whoever was left to help. Other drivers pulled over. Another woman and I walked toward the steaming disaster, our eyes averted, not wanting to see. Someone pried a laminated panel from the cab, and inside, there he was, crouched and groaning like the yet living child of the fallen creature. We watched as he somehow stepped out into the frozen morning in a t-shirt, clutching his elbow, a thin scrawl of blood streaking his tapestry of tattoos. He limped to the curb, and sirens wailed, and my heart beat wild against its cage, as if it too were trying to break free. Thanks. I'll just read one more, and this is a poem that appeared in Birmingham Poetry Review a while back, and it's called Made Bed, and it's a villanelle. I write villanelles sometimes, and I like them. So, Made Bed. He could have been my lover again that night. A whisper of dress lifting over ears, the tie unnodding, the sheets predictably white, the fumbling urgency leaving us breathless, light from lust tinged by guilt, the vanished years. He could have been my lover again that night, confusing past with present, desire with flight, image with image, elbow breastbone, shears, the tie unknotted, the sheets ironically white. Entangled our voices pitching like a kite in a storm with vowels, bleats, stifled swears. He could have been my lover again that night, if the night were only and alone. If right and right had not had different names. Affairs, the ties unknotting, the sheets iconically white and damp. And something's broken, lost, bright as shattered glass, as side-lit backstage mirrors. He could have been my lover again that night. The ties unknit, the sheets shamelessly white. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gylys. And our fourth and final reader is going to be Dr. Henry Hart. Henry Hart has published 4 poetry books, the most recent being Familiar Ghosts. His poems and essays have appeared in journals such as the Southern Review, Yale Review, and Kenyon Review. His biography, James Dickey, The World is a Lie, was a runner-up for a Southern Book Critics Circle Award in 2000. He has also published scholarly books on Seamus Heaney, Robert Lowell, and Geoffrey Hill. Wiley Blackwell published his biography, The Life of Robert Frost, in 2017, and LSU Press published Seamus Heaney's Gifts 5 days ago. I will be putting the link to the book in the chat. He's a professor at the English department at William & Mary. Without further ado, here is Dr. Hart.
Thanks very much for that flattering introduction, and thank you, Adam, for inviting me. It's nice to be included in this group of poets, to meet new people, to listen to new poems. I thought since Adam is dressed up as a Christmas reindeer, maybe it's appropriate to read a few Christmas poems. I think Adam is aware that I grew up on a Christmas tree farm. In fact, I still go back to the Christmas tree farm. I sometimes tell people that that's probably the only thing that I share with Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift spent a few years on a Christmas tree farm, and she has, I guess, a popular song called The Christmas Tree Farm. So this poem is partly about Christmas, as you'll see, but it focuses on a Christmas pageant that I had to sing in a long time ago, back in 1963 when I was in 3rd grade. It was kind of a disaster because I realized really for the first time that I was a bad performer and I was a terrible singer. I was also right at this time trying to, like so many other people, process the assassination of President Kennedy. So the poem is called Mystery Play, has a date, the date Kennedy was shot, November 22nd, 1963. It is almost Christmas. A blue woman kneels over the bandaged child, the hay ringed with wooden cattle. Above, angels flutter from windows. The star on the creche sticks its spokes into everything. How suddenly it happens, the faces rearing in judgment, the loudspeaker shaking with its terrible news. The buses wait as always in their arc of silence, ready to ferry us across dry rivers. It is almost winter. Again and again we see his head slumped in its cradle. Noon's gray wing folds the barberry and thistle and snow, the apples fallen into thorns. Nothing will be the same. Windows darken into mirrors. We wait like birds over deepening seeds. We used to always put bird seed out for the birds. Where I grew up, there was a lot of snow, and the seeds would gradually sink into the snow, and the birds would always be scrounging for the seeds. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was back on the old Christmas tree farm because my younger brother still lives there. And I was helping my brother give free trees to some of his friends. So it was kind of like in the old days. We were giving away trees that my father had planted shortly before he died. So this poem is called The Late Planting. It's about my father, very old, planting the last of our Christmas trees. And the poem is supposed to be a kind of monologue spoken by my mother. And believe it or not, my mother actually said some of these things. So my mother speaks. Your father thinks he's still 30 and can plant an acre of seedlings in an afternoon, even when the sun wilts the strongest black-eyed Susan in the field. Yesterday, he lost so much salt he couldn't sleep. Weak from that bad operation on his hip last summer, his legs knotted up with cramps. I asked why he kept planting Christmas trees when he wouldn't be around to sell them. He said, they give me a reason to go on living. I told him all our best friends from church had signed up for rooms at the retirement home just built by the hardware store in town. He said, you'd have to drive me there in a hearse. Besides, with my new spray and lime mulch, I can cut the time to grow a good tree in half. When I went to the field and told him to quit, he coughed until his sunburnt face grew redder. It's the ragweed, he huffed, waving me away. I need to get these last trees in before this killer heat burns their roots. I told him tomorrow he'd be 89 and the grandkids were coming for a party. He said the rows of spruce could be the candles on his cake. Then he swung the planter blade down hard, spit on the roots for luck, and stamped the dirt. So a lot of the poems tonight have been about crises. I find during crises that I often try to go back to a safe place. And I often think back to those early days when I'd go off by myself to plant Christmas tree seedlings. I'd often go back into our far fields where it was very quiet and our Christmas tree was very remote. From our farm, we could not see another house. So it was off in the sticks. So this poem is about thinking back to the Christmas tree farm when my son was born. He had a lot of troubles to begin with because his heart and his lungs weren't working properly, and special doctors had to be called in to do various things. So it's called Hard Birth for my son, James, who I think is in an airplane right now flying to Virginia. So he survived. You left your mother stunned on the hospital bed, a shell scoured by breakers, crusted with salt. Hoisting your body by the ankles, the doctor joked you were a chameleon who'd turned the wrong color. When you kept wheezing, wind riffled hemlocks by our barn 35 years before, and I huffed over crates of white and blue spruce seedlings dragged from the nursery's converted hearse. My father paid me 2 cents a tree to lug 5-gallon buckets heavy with water and peat into fields of wintergreen, where I chopped wedges with an adze and buried the tousled roots. It was so quiet I could hear a nuthatch scrounge for bugs on a maple. Sap kicked from spigots into pails. The brook sharpened its last blades of ice on rocks. In the maternity ward, your oxygen tent shimmered like brook ice. Wires clung to your chest like roots. On your heart monitor, Christmas trees flashed and vanished as if blown by electric wind. All afternoon, I waited for word from doctors about your erratic pulse. paste-limed green walls reeking with Lysol and exhausted breath. At home, I bumped into furniture and walls, watched the sun wring its bloody hands in clouds. When the clock clenched its fists on midnight, your heart thudded in a distant room. By your empty crib, I listened to my own breaths coming and going in a field of wintergreen as I tucked in seedlings, hoping they'd take root. Well, as I say, my son, who was a seedling at the time, took root, and he's doing fine today. So next poem, which will appear in the Birmingham Poetry Review at some point, has nothing to do with Christmas tree farms. It's really kind of a travelogue. It's about a trip I took with a friend about 20 years ago. This friend and I hired a guide and driver to retrace an expedition that my great-grandfather helped lead from one end of China to the other, one end of the Gobi Desert to the other. We ended up in the Muslim section, the Uyghur section of northwestern China, where there have been troubles, as I'm sure you know. As it turned out, the guide we hired couldn't navigate through the Gobi Desert. We got lost, which was rather frightening. And then we had another frightening incident because we finally got to a little tiny settlement, and 3 Chinese military policemen who apparently suspected we were running guns and bombs for the Uyghurs from Mongolia. We were very close to the border of Mongolia. Anyhow, well, they threatened to machine gun our Land Cruiser, hit us with a missile, lock us in jail. They kind of threw everything at us, but I'm here to tell about it. So, and after that frightening encounter with the police, our guide said something very strange. At first, I couldn't understand what he was really saying. And he referred to Gobi pandas. So that's the title of the poem, Gobi Pandas. Cans of diesel and water leaked for days from the Toyota's roof rack. Dust the color of camel fur clung to windows. Our guide could barely see through the wiper's arcs as we zigzagged between wind turbines down a ridge to the mud brick village. That's where your great-grandfather built a lean-to from camel blankets during the blizzard that ended his expedition, the guide said. Having eaten nothing but vanilla cookies for 3 days, I couldn't remember why the German Air Force had hired him to chart winds over the Gobi. We drove down the one dirt street in the village where men in white t-shirts played pool on rickety sidewalk tables and never looked up. Our guide asked twice about restaurants. A monk in burgundy robes pointed to a Coca-Cola sign. Good luck, he whispered in Chinese. Inside, the one waiter who took our order of ox tongue, tripe, and beer never served us. He brought tea to 2 to 3 military policemen who had marched through the door and demanded our passports. Our guide said, they want to know if we have Mongolia guns for Uyghurs. One brags he machine gunned a Volkswagen a German drove too close to his village. He says he will jail us if we keep tracking the expedition. After the police left, our guide whispered, do you hear temple bell now? It is Buddha saying, go home, Gobi panda. Well, I think what he meant was we were like pandas in the Gobi Desert. Pandas should not be in the Gobi Desert. We needed to go back home. I have one more poem. I don't know if you want to hear it. So one more poem. It's about my older brother who died young. He had a very stressful life. He drank way too much. My sister once told me a story about how when he left one of his apartments, they had to clean out all these bottles, empty bottles. And it got me to thinking about when I was younger, my brother and I used to love to go out into the woods and find ruined foundations and try to dig up antique bottles. We always used pitchforks. We kind of probe through old dumps and we try to listen for the click of the pitchfork tines on glass. And we found lots of antique bottles that way. I mentioned a hermit he was called the Leather Man, and he roamed around in the woods close to where I grew up, and he made or tried to make a living by tanning hides. So the poem is called Florida Water, refers to a bottle, and I'm referring really to my brother here. You taught me to listen for the click of pitchfork tines on buried glass, to clean stains from antique bottles by shaking sand and soap inside them, to haggle with dealers in town for an extra quarter. Once near foundation stones in the woods, you pried up a skull you claimed belonged to the leather man who'd slept in cellars and caves after his business failed and his fiancée left him. Last August, I buried a whiskey bottle with a jigger of your ashes near the ruined foundation, where you once told a story of a banker who'd summered out the Depression until vandals torched his antiques. I probed charred boards under leaf mulch, listened for the telltale click of tines, and dug up a skull-colored bottle of Florida water, like the clove-scented one above your bar. The one you believed would let you live forever. Yeah, for some reason, the last part of the line didn't get printed out. Anyhow, thanks very much for listening, and happy holidays.
Thank you so much. We're going to open the floor to any questions now that people have for the authors. You can put them in the chat or use the little hand gesture button and we'll go around and unmute you.
To be honest, you can unmute yourself.
Hi.
There's not
Okay.
of us here.
Okay, hi, Dr. Erica. You mentioned your bipolar disorder, and I wanted to ask you, how does bipolar disorder impact the creative process? Because for me, my creativity was kind of impacted by my manic episodes, and especially with like medication and everything, it kind of like numbs you out. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you. It definitely impacts my writing. I um, didn't realize that prior to 2019, everything I wrote when manic, pretty much. I just didn't know I was manic. I thought that was just what writing was, to, run around the room and walk the streets in the middle of the night and, clean your carpet and cartwheels and all of those kinds of things. Just that really ecstatic kind of energy. I didn't understand that that was abnormal. And when I started, after 2019, when I started being medicated for bipolar disorder, not just for depression, I went through a very long period of time where I felt completely numb, not just because of the depression, but also because of the medications, the way that they I mean, if you're trying to shut down the mood swings, you're shutting down the moods essentially. And I felt like I had lost my my verve, for lack of a better word. But now with some practice, I've gotten into more of a writing habit instead of wishing and waiting to be inspired by that mania like feeling. I make myself get up and I write every day, and I, revise every day. And so it's much more structured, and it, waxes and wanes with my moods, but writing is probably the most stable part of my life now, which is something I never thought that I would say. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Don't be shy.
Any other questions? Anybody? Anybody?
I see some questions in the chat.
Israel asked, Israel would like to know what y'all's process when deciding which personal stories to write about are. Are they things that carry emotional weight for you and it feels that you can't move beyond? If each of y'all wants to go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, sure. I'll go first since I've already unmuted myself. For me, they are definitely usually things that that carry some sort of weight for me, things that are things that I'm sort of interrogating or revisiting over and over again, kind of a obsessive quality that I can't get past. And somehow, exposing them on paper feels not like cathartic, because I think that's bullshit, but there's some sort of sense of satisfaction in that. So for me, they're definitely things that carry a heavy emotional weight.
I'll agree with that. You said obsessive or can't get past. There's a lot of, weird things that have happened to me. There's a lot of bad things that have happened to me, things that you would think would make a poem, but I'm very particular about the occasions of poems, and it's really always things that I can't get past. Those I don't know, core memories that bother me and come back up, and I find myself writing about the same things over and over, which I think is a good signpost to the path you're supposed to be going down. So I really try to pay attention to those and write those poems.
Yeah, I can weigh in too. I agree that yeah, there are some occasions that for some reason evoke language in a different way than me. Even the strangest experiences sometimes don't do that, but then there are these things that can happen that are they just stick with you for whatever reason. And yeah. Sometimes things will happen and I don't know if this is true for both Erica and Jay Bruce, but that don't interest me at the time, and then I circle back to them because of something else that happened. So yeah, I think we're always, I mean, if we're attentive as poets, and I'm not as disciplined as Erica is, but I don't write every day. I aspire to write every day, but when I am kind of paying attention, sometimes things will happen and they get stored in a little storage box, and then they come back, they circle back because they're prompted by something else. So yeah, I've had that happen a lot too.
Yeah, I would echo the comments. I like the phrase emotional weight. I've always thought with me that when there's a weight, something is pressing on me, something that's depressing me or oppressing me, that I want to try to press back, and that's what expression is all about. So I have different ways of expressing myself. I definitely do not express myself by singing. My singing is still a disaster. So yeah, I I press back silently by writing poetry or writing other things.
We have a question in the chat that is, what poets get you hyped nowadays, besides each other, of course?
Nobody wants to say any names.
Yeah, I think there's too many names is the problem.
Too many
There's
that's
9
the
people
problem
in
I'm
here
having.
that are on that list. I get the benefit of being of reading poems for a living, being an editor, and seeing books come in manuscripts. So there's a lot of great new voices that I get to read, and um, then if I'm lucky, sign and work with, and see those poets like kind of grow. And then there's my personal favorites and people that I've loved for a long time when their new books come out that I get excited about. And now that I can get books on a lot of poetry books come out on ebook now. I can just download them instantly and check them out. So that for me is really nice. But yeah, I'm not going to say any names because then
You
I'll
leave
get murdered
somebody
on
out,
Twitter.
and they're like a zillion. Plus, it's like so depends on the day and the time. What's going to fire me up anyway? Yeah, there's so many. We're lucky.
I'll give you one name.
Every day. Oh, sorry, Erica, you go ahead.
I was just going to give you one name because I've been obsessed ever since she unfortunately passed away, and that's Louise Glick. It's done wonders for me for the last several months. There's something so genius about what she's able to do on the page that I find that I can't help but be inspired by it. So I'll give you one name. That's it.
Well, I confess that I wrote that poem Mystery Play after reading a lot of Louise Gluck or Louise Glick. She was always one of my favorite poets. I'm quite close to a woman now who told me she's writing the biography of Louise Gluck, but we'll see. We'll see if that happens. But probably like you, every day I get new poems that are sent to me by different organizations. So I'm always reading new poems. And yeah, I just, you don't want to mention names. Well, I'll mention a name. Maybe you know this person, Edgar Kuntz. This is his book, Tap Out. And I read one of his poems, I think, online. And yeah, it just ignited a little light bulb in my head. So I started reading more of his poems and buying his books. And that's the way it often happens with me. The light bulb will go off, and then I'll order their books. But I teach poetry most of the time. I'm on leave right now, so I'm always reading and rereading poems, and I have lots of favorites. Maybe I should say, well, Seamus Heaney is one of my favorites since I just published a book with LSU Press about him.
Another question from the chat. This one's 2 questions. I'd love to hear more about daily writing practices. Do you feel that you have to force yourself to sit down and write? And if so, how deeply does that impact the flow state of writing? And 2, is poetry for the birds, or do birds exist for us to write poems about them?
I have 9 birds tattooed on me. So yes.
I used to have birds on the brain. I loved birds. I wanted to be the next John James Audubon. I'd paint birds. I'd make bird models. I filled my room with bird models I painted, and I was going to read one of my bird poems. I made a mobile of warblers. I love warblers. Anyways, yeah, birds inspire me, and if they want to listen to my poems, that's fine. They sing much better than I do.
Haley, what was the first part of the question again?
Love to hear more about daily writing practices. Do you feel that you have to force yourself to sit down and write? And if so, how deeply does that impact the flow state of writing?
Thank you. Since I asked, I'll answer. And I'll correct myself and say that I don't write every day. I watch football all day on Sunday. And I do have to, sometimes I have to force myself to sit down, period. Sometimes that's just the nature of the day. But sometimes I do have to force myself and say, okay, Erica, it's time to get some work done. Let's do some writing. And sometimes nothing happens, but I still try to use that time in a way that's beneficial to my writing. I will read, I will draw, I will build Legos, I will do something that involves making something in some kind of way or imagining something so that I'm stretching those muscles. And I include that when I say that I'm, working on my poems. That to me is part of the work that has to be done. So, yeah.
I love that Legos is a part of that answer. What what Lego packs are we talking? What patterns?
Oh, well, right next to me. Hold on, I'll just get it. I got this for my birthday. It's a Baltimore Ravens football that I haven't put together yet. So
Huge fan of Lamar Jackson. Love
well, how could you not be?
Best football player in the league, but
Yep.
yeah.
MVP.
I don't write every day. I always feel bad when people say they do. I I read an interview with Charles Simic when I was an undergrad where they asked him if he wrote every day, and he said I do something every day. And I've tried to like kind of live my poetic life that way. And well, like I said, I get to work on poetry books for a living. So every day I'm kind of engaging with poetry a little bit, but to sit down and write, I do have to kind of like carve out and defend some time for that, and it's not always flowing. So I do my best.
Yeah, I was, I've been encouraged by poets like Louise Glick, who said, she went through periods of time, years, in fact, when she didn't write. And I took heart in that somehow because I'm not as regular as I might be. I find that I will go through periods of time where I'm writing a lot, writing every day, really into it, and then I go through periods of time where I'm not, and I have to like live with myself and my own self-loathing until it's so bad that I, drag myself back to the desk and get at it just to stop hating myself so much. So I don't know. I don't recommend that as a practice, but that's been a little bit my pattern, at least it seems like in the last few years. But yeah, I encourage, I'm right now I'm working with a friend and we're giving each other prompts, and that's been helpful. So yeah, I think having people that you have to answer to is really helpful if you're struggling.
For me, if I can write every day, I do. I usually have a number of projects, but there's some days, say when I'm teaching or traveling or doing other things, I can't. And so a number of you mentioned football. I'm on research leave and I am trying to write every day. I'm about an old classmate of mine and a friend of mine who was a very good football player. In fact, I just before the readings tonight, I was listening to him online have a conversation with somebody else who's devoted to sports. Yeah, so this guy is Reggie Williams. I don't know if any of you probably don't remember him. He was a linebacker for the Cincinnati Bengals back in the 70s. We both graduated in 76, and he played for 14 years. He was in 2 Super Bowls against Joe Montana and the 49ers. And I hesitate to mention the word or phrase Super Bowl because Reggie still has a hard time dealing with losing those 2 Super Bowls. And then after that, Michael Eisner at Disney hired him to build what became the ESPN Wide World of Sports Complex, this huge sports complex at Disney World. He's had an amazing career, which I followed, and it really saddened me that he paid the price of being an NFL linebacker. He's had like 27 surgeries on his legs, and his aorta burst, partly because of all the surgeries, and then he had a stroke that left him mute. And I often talk to my poetry students about this. He said, when he thought about all the injuries, all the suffering he's gone through, not being able to speak was the most frustrating and the most painful. And when he was in the hospital, he said he could think of words, but he just couldn't speak them until he remembered having to memorize and recite a poem in college. And he started reciting that poem, and that unlocked his voice. Sometimes my students will say, well, poetry makes nothing happen, it's useless. And I like to tell them that story. For Reggie Williams, poetry made a difference.
Thank you for those answers. We have one more question in the chat, and this is: when the impulse is often to keep writing about the same core memories and events, how do you push yourselves into new/fresh topics, if you do?
Yeah, I think I was the core memory guy, so I'll start. I'm in this place right now where the book, my last book is just out, and it's I'm thinking about the next one. I'm writing poems for the next one, and in the case of this one, and I'm sure all the other poets in here can relate. Sometimes books take a long time to write, then they take 2 or 3 years to find a publisher, then it takes 2 or 3 years for them to come out, and then you got to tour on them for another year or two. So like I am really in this spot now where I'm trying to write fresh topics, fresh poems. I'm trying to grow as a poet, but I have this kind of like lingering fear that I've forgotten how to do it, which I just have to push through. But if you have success, if you find your voice and you have success with some books, then it's kind of scary to write that next one and change your voice, your tone, or your style, or your subject. So I've been wrestling with that. How do I push myself into? I just got to sit down and do them, and if the poems ain't no good, then the editors will not publish them, and I'll know. So.
Yeah, I think those are all really smart points. We can only be who we are as writers, and I mean, I think Jay Bruce is right that we do have we do have these subjects that are just going to be a part of our repertoires, and I mean, it's not that helpful to try and fight it. But I think we can push ourselves in different ways. Try like I said, I have a friend, prompts can sometimes really push us in interesting ways. I mean, sometimes the poems are bad, but it can make us say things in interesting ways, look at a subject from a different angle. So yeah, I think, and I was working on these breakup poems. Partly, I needed a more focused way to approach writing, and that was helpful because I began to look at the world through the lens of breakup, which is dark, but also it was helpful. I wrote some poems that I wouldn't have written otherwise. So yeah, I think just tricking. I tell the students I teach all the time, we have to almost trick ourselves into finding the rich veins, and there's no one way to do that. So just try whatever suggests itself to you and see if it works. And it's okay. I mean, we all fail all the time, and that's just part of being a writer.
I think that two things work for me when I'm feeling like I'm just kind of regurgitating the same material over and over again. And the first thing is to change locations. I tend to write in one space and do most of my work there. And if I go somewhere else, like to a coffee shop or the library or a park bench, wherever, something different usually happens because I'm stimulated by different things in those moments. I don't just have my Legos around me. All of a sudden, there are like other people and things like that. So switching up your location, and also for me, experimenting formally is extremely useful and important. I tend to operate in a roughly 10 syllable line. That's what makes me most comfortable. And I like my IAMs. So what I try to do is give myself like 2 trochees in a line and see what happens. Just to make myself uncomfortable and have to work in a different shape that for some reason ends up affecting the subject matter as well.
Just a brief answer. Yes, I'm also one of those poets who taps into core memories, taps into obsessions. About changing subjects, I often, maybe like most people, I react to the news. I react to subjects that I learn about by listening to the news, by reading the news. I often read the Washington Post or read other news sources. I remember Seamus Heaney once said, I write because I read. And I think sometimes I write because I read the news, and I learn about new subjects, but I respond to certain subjects probably because of core memories and obsessions.
All right. Does anyone else have any other questions before we wrap things up tonight?
Well, I'm so thrilled that everyone showed up, and I'm so excited now. I want to write tonight. And when everybody does their little clapping thing, whatever that little thingy is, I do this. And that's because of my blues name, Cash Money Rooster Jenkins. And I'm just pulling out the cash for you guys because y'all are worth it. And if I do a double Cash Money Rooster Jenkins, that means it's all there. And I'm so just enthralled with your poetry, and I'm so inspired. And thank you, everyone. Gosh, I see my former students, and it makes me want to cry. Pallavi's there at Columbia, probably. Maybe she's home already. But anyway, Dr. Gray, she's also a superhero, if y'all haven't figured that out. X-Men. But I love all of you. Thank you for being poets. Thank you for being lovers of poetry. And Jay Bruce, I miss you, brother. Henry, I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, Adam, thanks so much for inviting us all. I mean, I think you should go for a nice flight through the sky, to get ready for pulling Santa's sleigh. Yeah.
Did you see that I changed?
Oh.
Yeah, I changed. The ball's making me weird though. It's knocking against my cheek, and I feel like that there's like a cat who's, swishing the tail on me. It's freaking me out a little bit. But maybe I'll sleep in this tonight and get used to it and wear it for the next 13, 14 days. We'll see. Thank you so much, though. Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you, Jemiah, wherever she is, Molly, all of the staff of BPR, my interns who are just, they make it happen. They really do. I couldn't do it without them. And again, all it takes is M&Ms and beef jerky, and if they're vegetarians, it's just M&Ms, that's kind of cool. See y'all later.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.